Hi, I'm Eric Burch again, he, him pronouns. Who here was born in 1986 or after? Go ahead, Phil, admit that you're 39 years old. I've been attending UUCR your entire life, and I've seen a lot of changes and done many things. Every week for almost 40 years, I get an opportunity to pause and reflect on things that have happened and things that are about to happen and what I should do about them, if anything. What keeps me here is that our principles and adding the values gives me a map to help make decisions. As an atheist, well, I don't have a dogma or catechism to guide my life. UUCR is more than a list of principles and values. There's really nothing particularly unique about them, and I'm sure someone who's never heard of Unitarian Universalism would consider them a good list to live by. But what does UUCR add? Well, our community. Individuals cannot make significant social changes alone. We need to organize ourselves. No one of us can do the hundreds of tasks that make big changes a reality. I tell people that most of us organize 40 hours a week to make money, and it would be nice to find a place to organize for 40 hours a year to make the world a better place. If you read the announcements in the e-weekly, you'll find that this place is much more than where we attend Sunday services. There are activities and groups, actions in our community where we can all try to change our corner of the world. And now that I'm retired, I'm old. I think I'm putting in about 40 hours a month outside of UUCR trying to make the DMV a little better. Most of the organizations I'm working with I've found through our e-weekly or whatever medium we used in the olden days. My biggest current effort is the New Neighbors Interfaith Alliance, of which we are a part of. NNIA works with refugees, and since I started with them 3 years ago, I've met dozens of Afghan families living in Montgomery County, including one family who was deported by ICE. ICE knocked on their door in March and sent them to, I think, Brazil, and there's a long and bad story there. And now the future. Our country is broken. Not someday, not maybe. The United States is broken right now. Robert Frost said, "The best way out is always through." Focus on finding the light in the darkness and how to leverage obstacles to give us strength. I've said how UUCR is a platform for action, and I invite you to find a little thing and sign up for it. I know many of you are working too much, and that's okay. Maybe a few of you do have some time, and I ask that you join a group here and shine one little bit of light in your soul and in the world. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Leslie Shapard. My pronouns are she, her. And I moved here from my original home state of Tennessee in April. I was brought up very Methodist, and I loved church, but I stopped attending as an adult because I didn't belong for a couple of reasons. One, at that time, that denomination mostly rejected my relationship with my life partner and the person I would go on to marry. Two, that church expected and still expects people to state that they believe things that I don't necessarily believe. I may disbelieve or I may have doubts about. So I stopped attending. I did start visiting UU congregations occasionally, but I was very busy, so busy. And then I retired after a career with a government contractor. And then I was widowed after nearly 40 years with my spouse. In a time of deep sadness and personal separation, I joined the local UU congregation, where I was able to develop a sense of belonging, first through volunteer work and then through participation in a small discussion group. But something was still missing. I needed to make a change. I needed to follow a dream. I needed to move to a place I belonged. So I followed that dream to a place I had visited many, many times over the years for work. Yes, my dream was to move to Montgomery County, Maryland. In April, I started visiting area congregations. The first morning here, I felt this is where I belong. The welcome was so warm and so well thought out, from the positioning of the table and the greeter to the basic familiarity of the service with principles and values, but no creed. You're okay even if you don't believe exactly what I believe. To the welcome messages, to the visitors meeting right after the service, so I got to talk back right away. And where I also met a new friend to carpool with. To getting this booklet, which is full of ways to get involved, including opportunities to volunteer, to give of yourself, to be needed. All of these building blocks of belonging were here the first day. So, thank you, UUCR, for providing the resources and creating the environment for belonging.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Judy Barnes, and my pronouns are she and hers. I'm afraid it wasn't possible for me to be with you in person this morning, but here are just a few thoughts I had about belonging, and apologies in advance for my hoarse voice. So, one September, about 30 years ago, when my two now adult daughters were still in elementary school, my husband Kurt and I stumbled on UUCR. It was a Sunday, and I'd stayed home with our younger daughter while he and Claire went out in search of yard sales, a favorite weekend activity. I clearly remember him pulling up in the driveway and coming into the house to tell me that they'd stopped by this church that, in his words, was kind of cool. I must have looked either skeptical or alarmed, probably both, because he hastened to reassure me that no, he hadn't had a sudden religious conversion. But he did say that this place wasn't at all like the Midwestern Catholic Church he'd grown up in. Apparently they were Unitarians or something. As it turned out, he and Claire had inadvertently dropped in on UUCR's September in-gathering service. Kurt was very taken with the message of the water ceremony and the friendliness of everyone they'd met afterwards. So, somewhat reluctantly, I promised that the following Sunday I'd accompany him and Claire with our younger daughter, just to see what it was like. No promises, of course. And that was the beginning of our years-long relationship with UUCR, back then known just as UCR. We settled in pretty easily, not having realized how much we and our kids needed a place of belonging beyond our neighborhood and their schools. So the years passed by quickly. Our daughters became teenagers. Life got busy and complicated as it does with teenagers. And somehow we just managed to drift away from the church. And yet here I am, all these years later, back again. Being semi-retired, I felt the need for more community and connection, and I kind of had a hunch I'd find it here. I still see a few familiar faces from all those years ago, but the congregation has changed. It's bigger and it has a new energy. So for me, the process of finding my place has begun all over again. Yes, it is a little awkward after the service to stand with your cup of coffee, hoping to strike up a conversation with a stranger. And doing so is probably a bit harder for those of us who aren't extroverts by nature. But at this stage of my life, I guess I'm okay with a little awkwardness. It feels like life has come full circle. Belonging doesn't happen overnight, but when it comes, it's worth it. I guess I found home again. Thanks.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Matt Bruneel. My pronouns are he, him. When I was a kid, I hated telling people my favorites. Should be a good conversation starter for talking to a kid, right? What's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? I couldn't commit. If I told them my favorite, then forevermore they'd be able to call me out as a hypocrite if my favorites happen to change. Wait, I thought you said blue was your favorite color, Matt. What happened to you, man? You changed. To my early mind, announcing my preferences and my identity so publicly would be like freezing myself in amber. I preferred shape-shifting. I was also trepidatious about becoming a member of any group. If I ascribed to a group's identity, then not only would that label forever mark me, but I'd also be accountable for every action of every member of that group. Like, which religion out there is not weighted down by instances of abuse, cruelties in the name of a higher power, blatant hypocrisies? Religion was just not something I wanted to get tangled up with. Still, as I wound my way through undergraduate, I felt compelled to align myself with something bigger than me. I wanted to find the group, the religion, the identity that had the fewest knocks against it. The one that if I joined it, people couldn't shout at me and just say, do you know what your people have done in the name of God? So I found Judaism, or more accurately, Judaism found me. My senior year of college was a rapid and steady immersion into the world of Haredi Judaism. I had trips to Israel, Shabbats in New York, putting on tefillin, learning to daven. This all culminated in my decision to spend a year post-college in Israel studying in a yeshiva. I had become infatuated at that point with the rigorous examination of the Torah, challenge of studying the Talmud in the original Aramaic, the camaraderie, the value system that felt so unimpeachable, the abundant hospitality, and the feeling that I was just in the right religion. For the first time, I belonged to a religious community. Just as my younger self predicted, though, my belonging to the group made me accountable, liable. People could now look at me and project every notion that they had about Orthodox Judaism onto me. What's more, with a list of 613 commandments on my shoulders, I struggled to say when I was doing enough religion. The demands on my observance increased, and the people who could only look on me and my identity from a distance now started to include my family, my close friends. I eventually decided to break away from the religion and sever ties with the rabbis and the students that I had spent so much time learning and living and praying with. It was an arduous decision, but I've never regretted it. Since then, I have been hesitant to align myself with another religion. I just didn't trust myself to join up without going all in. Unitarian Universalism entered my life as Leisha and I were seeking a spiritual home for our young family. It felt different somehow. There was a similar welcoming warmth as Judaism, a similar awareness that we humans are better when we're together, but it was different. Only last week, as I was perusing the Wikipedia page on Unitarian Universalism, after going to services at the UU congregation of Lawrence, Kansas, did I find a word for that difference. Most religions, the article read, are creedal. Its congregants are bound by a creed, such as who they believe the Son of God is, or how many parts there are of God, or who God's chosen people are. But Unitarian Universalism is not creedal. We are covenantal. We are bound not to an ideology, but to our commitment to each other and the well-being of our community. I am now a member of the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Rockville. I'm in the process of learning how to own that identity in public, knowing that people are still able to project onto me whatever notions they have about UU, but I'm grateful to belong to a group that does not demand that its members adhere to any one stance or creed besides the continued growth and well-being of its members. I see now that I am indeed stuck in amber with you all, but ours is an amber that is free to flow and shimmer. Thank you.
Me again. Sharyn Horowitz, Brink. I was raised as a conservative Jew, but didn't find much meaning or comfort. The first time I went to a UU service, a pagan ceremony at UU Frederick, I freaked out when they called on my ancestors. What would my grandfather think? My ancestors were Jewish because that was their tribe. My family was pro-Israel because history tells us that Jews are never safe anywhere, and we needed a place to call home. I first went to Israel when I was 34, and it felt like coming home. I got involved with Hadassah, the women's Zionist organization that runs several institutions in Israel, including the primary trauma center in Jerusalem. I was proud that Hadassah had Muslim, Jewish, and Christian staff working together. When there was a suicide bombing, both the victims and the perpetrators would be brought to Hadassah in Kerem. Helping out, eventually, as a chapter president, felt like I was doing something positive. But my time with Hadassah showed me the conflict between my values and my support for Israel, and I stepped back. The first time my husband Paul and I came here was October 15th, 2023. I had been to synagogue the day before seeking comfort and belonging, but didn't find it. Coming here on that day, hearing what Reverend Rebecca had to say, I felt like I had found my real tribe. Slowly, over the past 2 years, I have gotten the distance I needed to see the situation in Israel even more clearly. Feeling like I belonged here gave me the courage to risk losing my Jewish friends by speaking out against what the Israeli government is doing. Some of you may have heard of Peter Beinart, who was a religious Jew raised in South Africa. He wrote The Crisis of Zionism in 2013, and I refused to read it. This year, he published Being Jewish After the Destruction of Gaza, A Reckoning. And thanks in part to this community, I feel brave enough to read passages like this. From the destruction of the Second Temple to the expulsion from Spain to the Holocaust, Jews have told new stories to answer the horrors we endured. We must now tell a new story to answer the horror that a Jewish country has perpetrated with the support of many Jews around the world. Its central element should be this: we are not history's permanent virtuous victims. We are not hardwired to forever endure evil and never commit it. Thank you to Paul. I never would have considered walking into UUCR before I met him. He expanded my world in so many ways, and we make each other stronger. Thank all of you for being my tribe, acknowledging my history, and giving me the strength to see how I need to grow.
Good morning, good morning. Good morning. My name is Stuart Silverman. My pronouns are he and him. What does it mean to be in community? How should we think about the concept of community? To start, we can think of community in a philosophical way, I suggest. Marcus Aurelius once said, "To let your impulse to act and your action have as your goal the service of the human community, because that for you is in conformity with your nature." There is the community of humanity that populates our planet. We are duty-bound to be stewards of the planet. Community can mean within our own neighborhoods and within our own homes. As an aside, as I speak with you, I recall growing up in Northeast Philadelphia many years ago. My folks were so proud of moving my brother and me to this new area. It was farmland, and there were very few houses. I think of that time as being a pioneer. And get this, there were no phone lines for the homes. In the back of my house, there was a hill. On the top of the hill was a shack. And inside the shack was a payphone. When the phone rang, someone would run up the hill, answer the phone, and call out a neighbor's name to come up and take the call. That was my community where I grew up early in my life. I joined UUCR for several reasons. First, I was watching a sermon one Sunday morning at home on YouTube. Reverend Rebecca was giving a sermon. It was so inspirational. I thought, who is that? Also, I joined this community, UUCR, because I sensed there were the ingredients and there was the hope that together we could live the values we cherish, and by doing so, pass those values on to the children. In closing, I want to send a message to the younger members of UUCR. Build a ladder to the stars. Think about the possibilities. Have a purpose in life and have a plan. Have a positive mindset and let that guide you. Act in accordance with your values. And remember to forever be young in heart and spirit. May God bless.